was a devoted mother of two, vanishing without a trace just before Christmas 1998. For 18 months, her husband played the part of the worried spouse, joining searches and speaking to the media. But behind the facade lay a chilling truth. The Mitchell Quy case, the deceptive husband who killed his wife. A happy family. She wouldn't just walk away, not from her babies, Lynsey Wilson's sister would later say, but on a cold December day in 1998, Lindsay vanished into silence. Lynsey Wilson was just 21 years old when she disappeared from her home in Southport, Merseyside. A devoted mother of two young children, Lindsay was described by family and friends as caring, bubbly, and someone whose life revolved around her kids. Her husband, Mitchell Quy, then 24, quickly became the face of the search effort. He appeared on local news, handed out leaflets, and gave numerous interviews. To the public, it seemed like a husband desperate for answers. He told police and the media that Lindsay had left him after an argument, supposedly running off with another man. She left on her own accord, he claimed, and took nothing with her. But cracks soon began to show. Lindsay's family insisted she would never abandon her children, especially not without a word, not even on Christmas. In fact, her last confirmed sighting was on December 16, 1998, just days before the holidays. Despite Mitchell's public grief, many found his behavior unsettling. He was quick to smile during interviews, laughed at odd times, and seemed more concerned with appearances than answers. The media began to scrutinize his actions, and so did the police. According to her sister, Lindsay had spoken of wanting to leave Mitchell before her disappearance. Their relationship had been turbulent, and Mitchell had a controlling streak, but there was no proof, only suspicion. It would take over a year before the shocking truth came to light. The investigation and deception. The search for Lynsey Wilson began as a missing person case, but from the start, investigators had a gnawing suspicion. Something wasn't right. Merseyside police launched an intensive investigation into her disappearance. No activity on her bank accounts, no communication with friends or family, no sightings. It was as if Lindsay had vanished off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, Mitchell Quy doubled down on his public role as the grieving husband. He opened his home to television crews, spoke calmly during interviews, and even brought in news reporters to film him caring for his two young children. His demeanor was eerily composed. In a now infamous interview with the BBC's Northwest Tonight, when asked directly if he had killed Lindsay, Mitchell leaned back and smirked. "I'm not going to answer that question because I don't need to." The clip stunned viewers. Many would later recall how something felt off. His tone, too casual, his body language, too smug. Quy was not just playing the role of a concerned husband, he was performing it. Behind the scenes, police grew increasingly uneasy. His stories about Lindsay's supposed disappearance were inconsistent, full of holes. One moment she left after a row, the next she was talking about starting over, and yet there was no body, no physical evidence, no confession. The case stalled. Still, detectives quietly placed Mitchell under surveillance. They believed Lindsay was dead, and that Mitchell Quy had something to do with it. But without proof, they had no way to bring charges. So for nearly 18 months, Mitchell Quy walked free, attending events, raising his children, giving interviews. All the while, the truth was buried, both literally and figuratively. The confession and crime details. 18 months after Lynsey Wilson's disappearance, the mask finally slipped. In June 2000, Mitchell Quy was arrested again, this time on stronger suspicions. While in police custody, the man who had played the grieving husband for over a year broke down. He confessed to killing his wife in cold blood. According to his statement, the murder happened during a heated argument in December 1998. Mitchell strangled Lindsay in their home while their two children slept nearby. There was no long-term plan, no calculated motive, just raw, violent impulse. But what followed was even more chilling. Unable to face the consequences, Mitchell enlisted the help of his younger brother, Elliot Quy, to dispose of Lindsay's body. Over the next several days, the brothers carried out a series of horrific acts in a calculated attempt to hide the murder. Mitchell dismembered Lindsay's body using tools from his own home. He kept the remains hidden inside the house while he continued living there. Days later, Elliot helped him transport the body parts, concealed in bags, to various locations around Southport, all under the cover of darkness. According to court documents and press reports, the two men dumped Lindsay's torso on the sand dunes near Southport's seafront, and other remains at different locations across the town. They deliberately used secluded areas and staggered their disposal trips to avoid drawing attention. The most heartbreaking detail? Lindsay's head and hands were never recovered. Authorities later confirmed that these critical parts were likely discarded in a landfill, lost forever beneath tons of waste. Despite the brutality, no one suspected a thing. Mitchell continued to appear in public as the concerned husband, while behind the scenes, he had turned his family home into a gruesome crime scene. The breakthrough came in 2000, when, acting on his confession, police began recovering Lindsay's remains. Parts of her dismembered body were discovered buried in sand dunes and woodland near the Sefton coastline. Formal identification required forensic analysis. The horrific nature of the crime stunned the public. The idea that Mitchell lived among friends and neighbors for over a year, hiding such a gruesome secret, was almost too horrifying to believe. Yet, every part of his confession was verified. Lindsay hadn't walked out on her family. She had been murdered in her own home and scattered across the town she once called home. The perpetrator's background and behavior. To the public, Mitchell Quy was a distressed husband pleading for his wife's return. But to those who knew him personally, a much more disturbing image emerged, one marked by obsession, manipulation, and deep-seated rage. According to The Independent, Quy had a history of explosive behavior. He had married Lindsay just 5 weeks after meeting her, and by all accounts, the relationship was tumultuous from the start. Lindsay's family described Quy as controlling, possessive, and emotionally abusive. Friends recalled that Lindsay had become increasingly isolated, a pattern consistent with coercive control. She rarely went out alone, and when she did, she was expected to report back promptly. Quy volatility wasn't confined to emotional manipulation. Police had been called to the couple's flat several times. In one instance, he destroyed every item in their home in a fit of rage, throwing a television out of a window. Though he was arrested for incitement to cause grievous bodily harm and criminal damage, the case never went to trial due to insufficient evidence. In a particularly chilling moment during the investigation, Detective Superintendent Jeff Sloan of Merseyside Police remarked, "She could walk in tomorrow, but I'm 99.9% sure she is dead." Despite such suspicions, Quy remained calm, almost too calm. He showed little of the emotional volatility one might expect from a man whose wife had supposedly abandoned her family. Instead, his frequent media appearances seemed calculated, as if he were performing a role he'd rehearsed. Behind his mask of composure was a man unraveling, and authorities knew it was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced. The legal proceedings and sentencing. By late 2000, Mitchell Quy carefully constructed facade had collapsed. Following his confession to the murder of Lynsey Wilson, the judicial system moved swiftly to deliver justice. In January 2001, Mitchell Quy appeared before Liverpool Crown Court and pleaded guilty to murder. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment, setting a minimum tariff of 17 years before he would even be considered for parole. His younger brother, Elliot Quy, who had confessed to helping dismember and dispose of Lindsay's body parts across Southport, was also sentenced. He received 7 years in prison for assisting an offender and obstructing a coroner. During sentencing, the presiding judge did not hold back. He condemned Mitchell's prolonged deceit, his public charade, his refusal to cooperate with authorities, and most painfully, the additional trauma he inflicted on Lindsay's grieving family by refusing to disclose her fate for over 18 months. The trial marked a bitter end to a haunting case, one where justice was served, but closure came at a devastating cost. Final thoughts and unresolved questions. What drives someone like Mitchell Quy to maintain such a chilling, elaborate facade, smiling for cameras, appealing to the public, all while hiding a monstrous truth? His ability to manipulate the media and gain public sympathy raised unsettling questions about how easily perception can be shaped. For over 18 months, Quy successfully misled both investigators and the nation, performing grief while concealing a brutal crime. It wasn't just deception. It was psychological warfare against Lindsay's grieving family and a community desperate for answers. Was there a moment, an early warning sign, a missed opportunity, where intervention could have saved Lindsay's life? life, her family believes so. They had voiced concerns about Mitchell's behavior long before her disappearance. But like many domestic abuse cases, their fears were lost in the absence of visible evidence until it was far too late. Mitchell Quy case remains a haunting reminder of how darkness can dwell behind the most ordinary of masks. What are your thoughts on the Mitchell Quy case? How can we, as a society, better support victims of domestic abuse to prevent such senseless tragedies? We'd love to hear your insights. Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more haunting true crime stories. Up next, a seemingly perfect couple's road trip turns into a nightmare when one of them vanishes without a trace.